The moon, round and luminous, bathed the city in a silvery glow, casting long shadows across the narrow, silent alleys. Midnight, the black cat with sleek, soft fur stretched lazily on the edge of his owner's window before leaping gracefully down into the street. The night was his kingdom, a world where he could slip unseen, like a phantom in the dark. That night, as on many others, Midnight set out in search of new stories. Every evening, he roamed the city streets. He knew every corner, every scent, every sound the night had to offer. But on this particular night, something unusual drew him toward a house on the corner of the main street. Through the living room window, Midnight witnessed a touching scene. A father, worn down by a long day of work, sat on the couch with a tired yet genuine smile on his face. His young daughter, golden curls framing her face, eyes sparkling, laughed with pure joy as she showed him a drawing she had made earlier that day. The father gently pulled her into his arms, finding in that tender moment a strength that allowed him to keep going. Midnight watched quietly. The father's love seemed to radiate through the air, a soothing warmth that stood in stark contrast to the chill of the night outside. Despite the fatigue etched into his features, the man appeared reborn whenever he touched his daughter. His hands, so accustomed to roughness and strain, were now gentle and protective. He listened carefully to every word she spoke, to every laugh that escaped her lips. The little girl was a whirlwind of joy and energy, bouncing across the couch as she excitedly recounted her day. The father gazed at her with eyes full of love and pride, savoring every second they spent together. To him, these moments were priceless treasures, pure happiness that lit up his repetitive, demanding days. Midnight continued to observe, captivated by a bond that was both tender and powerful. He watched as the father began telling his daughter a story, his voice low and reassuring, filling the room with a sense of safety and comfort. The girl snuggled close to him, listening intently, until little by little her eyelids grew heavy with sleep. At last, the father lifted her gently and carried her to her bed, tucking her in with care before placing a soft kiss on her forehead. Silence returned to the house, leaving only a faint light glowing in the living room. Midnight lingered for another moment, enjoying the restored calm. He knew that tomorrow, and the days that followed, this home would continue to shelter that strong, pure parental love. Satisfied with his discovery, the black cat slipped away quietly, heading off toward new nighttime adventures. He loved his nightly walks, where every illuminated window revealed another side of human love. To him, the night was never merely an absence of light. It was a stage where life's tragedies and comedies played out, a world where love appeared in all its forms. The moon shone high in the sky as Midnight, the black cat, continued his nocturnal wanderings. He left the father and daughter's home with a gentle sense of peace, but the night was still young, and his journey had only just begun. He crossed several streets in silence, his paws barely touching the cobblestones, until a small house at the end of a quiet alley caught his attention. Through the window, Midnight saw a warm, gentle light. Curious, he crept closer and spotted an elderly woman sitting in a chair, a photo album open on her lap. Her white hair was neatly arranged, and her eyes, though tired, shone with endless tenderness as she studied the pictures. Midnight perched on the window ledge, his deep blue eyes fixed on the moving scene before him. The woman slowly turned the pages, her fingers brushing each photo with a softness infused with longing. The yellowed photographs told the story of a love long past, a love that had left a lasting mark on her life. Midnight could feel the nostalgia hanging in the air, a bittersweet sorrow wrapped in memories of another time. Every night, the elderly woman repeated this ritual, immersing herself in memories of her late husband. She reread the love letters they had written to each other, carefully preserved in a wooden box, smiling as she recalled the happy moments they had shared. Midnight could almost hear their laughter and whispered affection echoing through the room, voices from a distant past, never truly forgotten. One day, during one of her walks in the nearby garden, the woman came across a stray dog. He was small and scruffy, but the sadness and pleading in his eyes touched her heart instantly. She decided to take him home, giving him a second chance and giving herself a new source of comfort. Midnight observed this new dynamic with interest. Though the dog was initially wary and frightened, he quickly grew attached to the woman. He followed her everywhere, his brown eyes reflecting gratitude and affection. Their bond deepened rapidly, and each day brought small joys and a new shared routine. Evenings that had once been filled with loneliness were now warmed by the loyal dog's companionship. Slowly, the woman's smile returned, and her eyes regained the spark she had lost. From his quiet vantage point, Midnight saw how this new form of love brought fresh energy and peace into her life. She continued to cherish her memories of her husband, but she also embraced this new source of affection and happiness. Upon returning home one evening, she sat in her usual chair, the dog curled up at her feet. She took out a recent photo of the two of them and slipped it into the album beside her husband's pictures. To her, it was a symbol of acceptance and of life moving forward. Love has many forms, and each one deserves to be embraced and celebrated. Midnight watched for another moment, appreciating this new face of love he had discovered that night. When he had seen enough, he quietly stepped away from the window, ready to continue his nocturnal explorations. The night was an endless stage, and Midnight knew there were still countless stories waiting for him. Stories of love in all its shapes. Under the moon's gentle glow, Midnight, the black cat, continued his nightly journey. This time, his silent steps led him to a livelier neighborhood, where the houses were newer and the gardens carefully landscaped. The scent of artemisia drifted from a partially open window, catching his attention. With a nimble leap, Midnight landed on the windowsill and peered inside. Inside, a young couple was busy with something. They appeared to have just moved in, with cardboard boxes still scattered throughout the apartment. The young man, with tousled hair and a mischievous smile, struggled to assemble a piece of flat-pack furniture, while the young woman, long brown hair tied back in a ponytail, studied the instructions with intense focus. Midnight sensed a mix of excitement and tension in the air, a blend of anticipation and discovery. The young man, whom we'll call Lucas, frowned as he tried to force a stubborn shelf into place. Meanwhile, the girl, Emma, attempted to help by reading out the directions. Midnight sensed a mix of excitement and nervous tension in the air. a blend of anticipation and discovery. The young man, whom we'll call Lucas, was struggling to get a stubborn shelf to stand upright. He frowned as he tried to line up the pieces, while the girl, Emma, attempted to help by reading out the instructions. Despite their efforts, the shelf stubbornly refused to stand straight. Lucas ended up sprawled on the floor, wearing a charming grin. Laughing, he said, "I think we might have missed something." Emma couldn't help laughing too. She set the manual aside and sat down next to him, their shoulders brushing lightly. "Maybe we should try again tomorrow," she said, resting her head on his shoulder. Lucas slipped an arm around her shoulders and pulled her into a gentle hug. They stayed like that for a few quiet moments, enjoying each other's warmth and closeness. From his perch, Midnight watched the scene of tenderness and understanding, captivated by the softness and modesty of their budding love. He then saw them get up and head into the kitchen, where they began preparing a meal together. Emma chopped vegetables while Lucas handled the cooking. Their movements were sometimes awkward, bumping into each other or crossing paths unexpectedly, but they exchanged smiles and laughter, turning those spontaneous moments into cherished memories. After dinner, they settled onto the couch under a warm blanket. A movie played, but their minds were elsewhere. Midnight noticed the quick glances they shared, and their hands shyly searching for each other beneath the blanket. Eventually, Lucas took Emma's hand in his. Their fingers intertwined gently. They leaned closer, their heads nearly touching, as a comfortable silence settled between them. As time passed, Midnight continued to observe, taking in every moment of their shared discoveries. He watched Lucas place a light kiss on Emma's forehead, and she responded with a calm smile, eyes closed, savoring the moment. Their love, young and shy, was full of promise and possibility. They were learning each other, understanding the subtleties of movements and words, and slowly building a home founded on respect and tenderness. Quietly, Midnight slipped away from the windowsill. As he melted back into the shadows of the night, he reflected on the beauty of love in its earliest stages, that delicate, wonderful phase where every moment is a discovery and every gesture a silent declaration of affection. To him, the night had offered yet another lesson about the many faces of human love, and he knew more adventures awaited him in the sleeping houses of the city. Midnight resumed his nighttime exploration with lazy steps, occasionally stopping to bat at a leaf dancing in the air, or to startle a dog from behind a gate. Ah, dogs, always loud and overly excited about the smallest things. Midnight, on the other hand, knew how to enjoy the night with elegance and calm, as only cats can. Of course, he couldn't resist stopping beneath a street lamp to lick his paw and groom his whiskers. After all, a cat must remain stylish, even while carrying out his duties as an observer. As he wandered on, a new scent caught his attention. A secluded house seemed to be hiding many secrets. Drawn by curiosity, Midnight headed toward it, his steps barely touching the cobblestone street. Through partially drawn curtains, he spotted a dim, flickering light. Inside, a man sat at a desk, a pen in hand, deeply absorbed in writing a letter. The room was softly lit by a desk lamp, creating a warm, intimate atmosphere. Midnight jumped onto the windowsill and settled in comfortably to watch. The man, whom we'll call Antoine, appeared fully focused on his task. He chose each word with care, his face reflecting deep emotion. Midnight noticed a stack of written letters beside Antoine, ready to be sent. Antoine was writing to his wife, Sophie, who worked abroad. Their relationship was sustained through constant effort and honest communication, despite the distance between them. Midnight watched as Antoine finished his letter with a gentle smile. He reread it one last time before folding it carefully and slipping it into an envelope. Then he opened his laptop, preparing for a video call. Moments later, Sophie's face appeared on the screen, lighting up with happiness at the sight of her husband. Their conversation was filled with love and understanding. They talked about their days, exchanged stories and laughter, despite the physical distance. Midnight felt the strength of their bond, an emotional connection that stretched beyond miles. Every word and every smile was a promise of loyalty and devotion. Antoine showed Sophie the letter he had written, and she responded with a deeply moved smile. They spoke of their future plans, their shared dreams, and how they faced the challenges of separation together. For them, every conversation was like a breath of air, a way to draw closer, despite the thousands of miles between them. Midnight watched the scene in silent admiration. He understood that love can thrive even in the hardest circumstances, through determination and mutual commitment. Antoine and Sophie proved that distance is not an insurmountable barrier, but a challenge faced side by side. When the video call ended, Antoine sat before the screen with a bittersweet smile. He closed the laptop and stood to put his things in order. Midnight followed him with his gaze, impressed by the strength and resilience of this long-distance love. For Antoine and Sophie, every day apart was a test, but also a testament to their devotion to one another. Antoine stepped toward the window to open it and let in some cool air. In that moment, he noticed Midnight resting comfortably on the windowsill. With a smile, he said, "Ah, there you are. Looks like you like this house too." Antoine reached out and gently stroked Midnight. The cat closed his eyes and purred in pleasure. Then Antoine whispered, as if speaking to an old friend, "You know, little cat, love can be hard sometimes. Sophie and I do everything we can to stay close, despite the distance. Letters, calls, that's all we have for now. But it's enough, because we truly love each other." Midnight felt the sincerity in Antoine's words. He looked up at him, his amber eyes gleaming in the lamplight. Antoine continued petting the cat, finding quiet comfort in his silent presence. Antoine added, "Even when she's far away, I still feel her with me. Every letter, every call reminds me why I'm waiting so eagerly for her return. Love, I think, is patience and trust." After a few moments of shared silence, Antoine straightened and smiled at Midnight. "Thank you for the company, little one. You're always welcome here." Midnight leapt gracefully from the windowsill, ready to continue his nightly explorations. He vanished softly into the shadows, reflecting on the beauty and complexity of human love. That night, he had learned that love can still flourish in absence, through honesty and the steady effort of devoted hearts. Midnight continued his nocturnal journey, his black fur blending into the alleyway shadows. After enjoying a full meal on the balcony of a kind woman who always left food out for him, he felt ready for new adventures. His belly was full, his mind alert, and he climbed the city walls lightly until he reached the top of a building where he could watch scenes of life unfolding behind glowing windows. He loved this time of night, when the city calmed and every window became an intimate stage. The moving shadows behind curtains sparked his curiosity. Couples speaking softly, solitary figures absorbed in reading or work. And sometimes, families gathered around a table. Each scene told a story. And Midnight loved guessing the tales hidden behind the illuminated glass. Suddenly, one particular sight caught his attention. An elderly woman, her silver hair, framing face etched with time, sat in a large, warmly lit room. She seemed to be alone, yet her energetic, expressive movements suggested she was engaging someone beyond Midnight's view. Midnight narrowed his eyes, puzzled. Why was she moving with such intensity and passion? Was she talking to someone? Or was she alone, lost in delirium? A ripple of concern passed through him. Human stories were full of haunted houses and elderly women overtaken by dark forces. What if something sinister was happening in this home? The thought that the woman might be in danger or under some supernatural influence sent a shiver through his whiskers, a mix of fear and excitement. He had to find out. With a detective's caution and a cat's relentless curiosity, Midnight slipped down quietly and crept toward the house. He entered through a sagging window, his paws barely making a sound. Inside, he hid in a dark corner, eyes glowing as he watched closely. As he moved nearer, the picture became clear. The woman was not alone. A small boy, likely her grandson, sat on a rug, eyes wide and a smile spread across his face. The grandmother was telling a story, but it was far from an ordinary reading. She acted out every scene with remarkable energy and life. Midnight relaxed the moment he realized his fears were unfounded. The woman was not possessed or unhinged. She was simply telling wonderful stories to her grandson. The dramatic gestures he had mistaken for something frightening were playful performances of dragons and princesses. She roared like a dragon, mimicked galloping horses, and transformed into a brave princess. The boy laughed and clapped, completely absorbed in his grandmother's adventures. The black cat watched the touching moment, moved by the warmth and love between grandmother and grandson. He thought about how love across generations carries a special kind of magic, a bond that transcends age and time. Satisfied, Midnight slipped quietly out of the house, leaving the grandmother and her grandson to their nighttime adventures. He returned to the shadows, his heart full of new lessons about love's many forms. Then, something unexpected caught his eye. As he passed a building, he noticed a small shadow leaning dangerously close to the edge of a balcony. It was a child, captivated by something outside, leaning farther and farther forward. Midnight sensed danger instantly. The child was about to fall, and the mother inside the apartment seemed unaware. The cat crept closer, suppressing his usual noises. He knew he had to act quickly to prevent a tragedy. Spotting a heavy flower pot resting on a ledge, Midnight rushed toward it with determination. With a precise movement, he knocked the pot to the ground, sending a loud crash echoing through the building. Startled by the noise, the mother rushed onto the balcony. She screamed when she saw her child in danger and immediately pulled him into her arms. From his hiding place, Midnight felt a wave of relief. He had succeeded in drawing her attention just in time. Still shaken, but deeply grateful, the woman looked toward the black cat sitting nearby. She quickly understood that he had deliberately knocked over the pot. She whispered, "Thank you, little cat. You saved my son." She gently approached and stroked his fur in gratitude. As a reward, she brought him a treat from the kitchen. Then, noticing that her child was still frightened and unsettled, she had an idea. Carefully, she picked up Midnight and carried him into the child's room. She said, "Maybe you can help calm him down." Midnight sat down, slightly unsure about becoming a child's toy, and watched the boy curiously. The child immediately felt reassured by the cat's presence and hugged him tightly. Feeling the child's warmth and affection, Midnight surrendered and began to purr softly. The mother sat beside the bed, whispering loving words to her son. "You're safe now, my treasure. This little cat will watch over you." Midnight, fully relaxed, eyes closed, enveloped by the family's warmth and care. After a while, he stirred gently. The child was fast asleep, a peaceful smile on his face. Seeing that the cat had done his job, the mother thanked him again. "Thank you, my little hero." She gently stroked his head. Midnight stretched, climbed off the bed, and knew it was time to continue his journey. He slipped quietly out of the room, casting one last glance at the sleeping child and his grateful mother. Back on the silent streets, he felt proud of a night well spent. He had saved a life and brought comfort to a family. The moon began to sink toward the horizon, signaling the end of the night. After a night filled with adventures and discoveries, Midnight felt it was time to return home. His journeys had carried him across the city, where he had witnessed countless expressions of love. With every window he watched and every home he visited, he learned something new about the secrets of the human heart. Tired but content, Midnight crossed the quiet, familiar streets until he reached a small house in a peaceful corner. This house was his home, and its owner always waited eagerly for his return. The sole occupant, a writer named Pierre, spent his days writing stories about love, stories inspired by the tales Midnight brought back each night. The cat leapt gracefully through the open window and entered the room. Pierre sat at his desk, a lamp illuminating scattered papers. Hearing the soft sound of paws, he looked up and smiled at his faithful companion. "There you are, Midnight," he said. "So, what stories have you brought me this time?" Midnight jumped onto the desk and settled comfortably, purring under Pierre's touch. The writer knew his cat returned every night with new inspiration, love stories he himself had never lived, but deeply wished to one day. Pierre picked up his pen and began to write, soothed by Midnight's steady purr. He wrote about a single father and his daughter, an elderly woman and her dog, a young couple discovering love, and many other stories the cat had silently shared. Every word and every sentence carried the magic and tenderness of the scenes Midnight had witnessed. As he wrote, Pierre drifted into thought and murmured, "Midnight, sometimes I wonder if I'll ever know the kind of love you describe. Your stories are beautiful, but they also remind me of how alone I am." Midnight sensed the sadness in his owner's voice. He moved closer and rested his head on Pierre's arm, inviting him to pause. He looked up at him, amber eyes filled with understanding and affection. Pierre smiled sadly and stroked Midnight's head. You know, you're my only companion. Maybe I don't know love the way it appears in your stories, but you're here for me every night and every day. Midnight purred more deeply, as if reminding him that love takes many forms. The bond they shared, though different from the romance Pierre wrote about, was still a genuine and meaningful kind of love. Pierre smiled and said, "You're right, Midnight. You bring me so much comfort and joy. Maybe the love I'm searching for is already here in our friendship." Midnight climbed onto Pierre, pleased to offer him a sense of peace. He knew their shared moments were precious, and that love existed in every touch and every glance, even without grand romantic words. The writer took a deep breath and returned to his work, inspired by Midnight's calming presence. The love stories he wrote were now infused with the empathy and tenderness he shared with his cat. And so, the night drew to a close. Midnight curled up against Pierre, closing his eyes in contentment. He knew his nightly adventures had a purpose, to show his owner that love exists everywhere, even in the simplest and quietest bonds. When dawn finally broke, Pierre set down his pen and looked at Midnight. "Thank you, my friend. Because of you, I've learned that love has many forms, and that the most important thing is to recognize it and cherish it." Midnight purred in response, warmed by Pierre's affection. Soon, they drifted off to sleep together, hearts full of gratitude and peace. For Midnight, every night was a new adventure and a new lesson about human love. For Pierre, every day became a chance to discover the love that had already been surrounding him all along. And so Midnight continued his nocturnal explorations, discovering, witnessing, and sharing the many faces of love, knowing he had already found a precious form of affection at home.